You check your phone. Nothing. No messages. No plans. No invitations. Society tells you this means something is wrong with you. That loneliness is a defect. That isolation is failure. Machiavelli would disagree. He understood a truth most people never face. As power, awareness, and independence increase, social compatibility decreases. This video is not about coping with loneliness. It's about recognizing when solitude is a filter, not a flaw. If you have few or no friends, it may not be because you can't connect, but because your psychology rejects what most people accept. By the end of this video, you'll understand why your circle is small, why average people feel uneasy around you, and why solitude may be the cost of clarity. This is not comfort content. This is identification. Hyperacute pattern recognition. You don't experience social interaction the way most people do. While others listen to words, you track behavior. While they absorb tone, you measure timing. While they accept warmth, you scan for consistency. This is hyperacute pattern recognition. It's not negativity, it's sensitivity to signal. You notice micro-shifts others ignore. Hesitation before agreement. Enthusiasm that fades when effort is required. Friendliness that disappears when there's nothing to gain. These details register instantly, not because you're paranoid, but because your mind is built to detect incongruence. Inconsistencies don't feel neutral to you. They feel loud. When someone says, "I've got your back," but avoids action, your system flags it. When praise isn't followed by alignment, you feel resistance instead of reassurance. When warmth feels rehearsed, something inside you pulls away automatically. Fake warmth triggers internal rejection, not as a moral judgment, as a biological response. Most people can tolerate this friction. They rationalize it. They smooth it over to preserve comfort. You can't. Your nervous system treats inauthenticity like interference, something that degrades clarity. This is why social spaces drain you. To others, gatherings are emotional exchanges. To you, they are streams of data. You're not overthinking. You're processing. You watch people adjust personalities based on hierarchy, approval, or advantage. You see the mask shift, and once you see the performance, you can't fully participate in it. Observation makes others uncomfortable. Even silence can feel invasive to people who are hiding. They sense that you're not buying the act. They may call you intense, judgmental, or distant, but what they're reacting to is exposure. You become a mirror, and most people don't like their reflection. This is why friendships around you often dissolve quietly, not through arguments, but through avoidance. You didn't attack anyone. You didn't confront them. You simply didn't reinforce the illusion. Your clarity raised the cost of interaction. If you've lost people, ask yourself honestly, did you lose them, or did they leave once they realized you couldn't be managed by appearances? Hyperacute pattern recognition narrows your circle because it raises the entry standard. Only those whose words and actions align can stay, and those people are rare. Comment, "I see patterns," or comment, "I don't ignore inconsistencies." Because when you see through masks, you can't enjoy the performance. Intolerance for social entropy. Most social interaction is noise, recycled opinions, predictable complaints, conversations that exist only to fill silence. For most people, this noise is comforting. For you, it's draining. This is intolerance for social entropy. Small talk doesn't bore you, it costs you. It produces no signal, no insight, no movement. It consumes attention without returning value. Your nervous system recognizes this immediately. What others experience as bonding, you experience as cognitive theft. Shallow conversation feels like a tax on consciousness. You crave ideas, systems, and meaning because your mind naturally operates at a higher abstraction layer. You think in frameworks, causes, consequences, and trajectories. You don't want to know what happened. You want to know why, how, and what it leads to next. This creates friction. When conversations revolve around gossip, surface drama, or repetitive narratives, your engagement drops, not out of arrogance, out of misalignment. Your mind is searching for pattern and purpose while others are trading comfort signals. You're not unsociable, you're unsatisfied. Most people sense this immediately. Depth makes them uneasy. When you ask questions that cut beneath the surface, the room often goes quiet. Someone laughs nervously. The subject changes. You're labeled intense, serious, or heavy, not because you said anything wrong, but because depth destabilizes group equilibrium. Groups survive on shared simplicity. Depth introduces hierarchy. Clarity introduces accountability. Meaning introduces discomfort. So groups protect themselves by rejecting it. This is why your presence can feel disruptive even when you're calm. You don't amplify the noise, you expose it. And exposure threatens social cohesion built on distraction. You operate differently. Your attention is selective. Your curiosity is directional. Your tolerance for entropy is low. This makes connection rare, not because you don't want people, but because most interactions don't meet the minimum threshold of substance. You could pretend, you could nod, laugh, and play along. But that performance costs energy you'd rather invest elsewhere. So you withdraw. Silence becomes more efficient than engagement. This withdrawal is often misread as superiority or detachment. In reality, it's conservation. You understand intuitively that attention is finite, and wasting it on noise leaves less for creation, understanding, and growth. This is why your circle is small, not because you reject people, but because most interactions never reach you. And depth doesn't just isolate you, it destabilizes groups. The autoimmune response to control. You don't resist authority because you're rebellious. You resist it because your system treats unjustified control as a threat. This is an autoimmune response. Just as the body attacks foreign invaders, your mind reacts to imposed conformity. When a group demands agreement without reasoning, something inside you tightens, not emotionally, neurologically. Groupthink triggers resistance. You feel it in subtle ways. A pressure behind the eyes, a quiet irritation, a refusal to nod along when something feels off. Even when compliance would be easier, your system won't allow it. Popularity does not register as authority to you. You don't respect opinions because they're common. You don't accept ideas because they're trending. You don't align just to belong. You require logic, evidence, coherence. This immediately places you at odds with most social systems. Groups operate on agreement, not truth. Stability, not accuracy. When someone says, "Everyone thinks this," your instinctive response is not acceptance, it's inquiry. You ask the question most people are trained not to ask. Why? That single word destabilizes fragile hierarchies. Why are we doing it this way? Why is this rule unquestioned? Why does this person lead? These questions don't seek conflict. They seek structure. But to a group built on obedience, questioning feels like betrayal. This is why you're often labeled difficult, arrogant, or uncooperative. Not because you are those things, but because you don't reinforce authority through submission. You don't hate rules, you hate unexamined rules. You don't reject leadership, you reject unearned leadership. This trait makes you incompatible with narcissistic personalities and insecure groups. Narcissists require affirmation. They surround themselves with agreement. You don't supply it. You ask for clarity instead. And clarity threatens control. When groups sense they cannot steer you emotionally or socially, they often attempt exclusion. They hope isolation will soften your edges, that the discomfort of being alone will make you comply. But that's where they miscalculate. You don't crawl back, you adapt. You use solitude as autonomy, distance as leverage, exile as focus, This resistance is not defiance for its own sake. It's a refusal to surrender agency. You understand instinctively that once you outsource judgment, you lose sovereignty. So you stand apart, not to be different, but to remain intact. This resistance doesn't make you rebellious, it makes you incompatible. The architect's priority. You don't experience time the way most people do. To them, time is something to fill with conversation, distraction, entertainment, noise. To you, time is something to use. This is the architect's priority. Long-term vision overrides social comfort. You feel the cost of wasted hours physically. A night spent drifting through meaningless interaction doesn't feel neutral. It feels like theft from your future self. So you begin making choices others don't understand. You say no to casual plans, no to routine hangouts, no to just relaxing. Focus replaces entertainment, not because you hate pleasure, but because you understand trade-offs. Every hour spent numbing attention is an hour not invested in building something durable. Skill, body, business, understanding. You are not escaping life. You are constructing it. Invitations stop because you keep saying no. At first, people try to negotiate. Then they joke about it. Then they stop asking. They interpret your absence personally. They assume rejection, superiority, or disinterest. In reality, you've simply prioritized trajectory over togetherness. Solitude becomes functional. You begin to recognize its utility. Without constant interruption, your thinking deepens. Without social obligation, your schedule tightens. Without emotional noise, execution sharpens. You don't withdraw because you dislike people. You withdraw because presence demands energy, and your energy is allocated toward a mission. This creates distance, and distance creates misunderstanding. People who live moment to moment interpret your focus as judgment. Your discipline reflects their drift. Your restraint highlights their excess. Even when you say nothing, contrast alone can feel like criticism. This is where the hostility comes from. Not envy exactly, but exposure. Your refusal to indulge reveals what others avoid facing, the cumulative cost of distraction. You remind them, silently, that life is moving, that time is passing, that comfort is temporary. That's unsettling. So they reframe you. They say you're obsessed, cold, detached. Labels are easier than self-examination. You don't correct them. You keep building. Because you know something most people don't want to admit. Construction requires sacrifice. Every structure demands clearing space. Every creation excludes alternatives. Every serious path narrows. You accepted this early. That's why your circle is small. That's why your days are quiet. That's why your future looks different. But focus alone doesn't explain the hostility you attract. The unconscious mirror effect. Your isolation doesn't happen quietly. It provokes reactions. This is because your presence functions as a mirror, and most people are avoiding their reflection. Your silence amplifies their insecurity. When you enter a room and don't compete for attention, don't perform, don't seek validation, something destabilizing happens. Others become more aware of themselves. Their jokes feel forced. Their confidence feels rehearsed. Your stillness turns their internal noise up. You didn't accuse them. You didn't challenge them. You simply existed without needing anything from them. And that is enough. Your self-sufficiency triggers shame. Most people survive psychologically by external regulation. Approval calms them. Agreement stabilizes them. Belonging reassures them. When they encounter someone who does not require these inputs, it highlights their dependence. They feel small, not because you made them small, but because the comparison is unavoidable. Shame is not processed consciously. It is redirected. You disrupt mutual delusions. Many social bonds are built on unspoken contracts. I'll validate your story if you validate mine. I won't question your choices if you don't question mine. I'll pretend everything is fine if you do. You don't sign this contract. When someone complains about a situation they created, you don't soothe, you clarify. When someone seeks validation for avoidance, you offer responsibility. When someone performs victimhood, you don't applaud. This breaks the illusion. And broken illusions turn defensive. Projection turns into aggression. Instead of asking why they feel uncomfortable around you, people assign intent. They label you arrogant, cold, judgmental, distant. These labels are not descriptions. They are emotional shields. By making you the problem, they avoid facing the real source of discomfort, themselves. Psychologically, this is projection. The traits they deny internally, weakness, fear, dependency, lack of direction, are placed onto you so they can attack them safely. You become the villain in their internal story. This is why isolation often feels targeted. You weren't ignored by accident. You weren't excluded randomly. You weren't misunderstood innocently. You were rejected defensively, not because you harmed anyone, but because you refused to participate in collective self-deception. This is a brutal realization, but a clarifying one. You are not lonely because you lack social skill. You are isolated because your presence collapses fragile identities. People who live comfortably inside illusions will always push away those who expose reality, even silently. You didn't choose this role consciously, but once you see it, you understand something important. You were never meant to fit in. This is why your isolation often feels targeted, not accidental. Temporal displacement. You don't live where most people live. They live in the moment. You live in the consequence. This is temporal displacement, the rare trait of operating mentally in the future while everyone else is anchored to the present. You simulate outcomes others ignore. Where others see a decision, you see a chain reaction. Where others see just tonight, you see habit formation. Where others see comfort, you see cost. Your mind runs forward automatically. You project timelines. You calculate second and third order effects. You don't need to be taught this. It happens involuntarily. That's why conversations feel misaligned. When someone says, "Relax, just have fun," your nervous system tightens, not because you hate pleasure, but because you can already see where repeated fun leads when it's unexamined. You see habits becoming destinies. Most people treat habits as small, reversible choices. You see them as identity architects. You notice how a friend's casual drinking becomes dependency, how skipping responsibility becomes avoidance, how shallow thinking becomes a ceiling they never break through. And when you point this out, gently or not, you're labeled intense, paranoid, or joyless. In reality, you're simply living ahead of schedule. You're not pessimistic, you're predictive. Just have fun feels irresponsible, not morally, structurally, because your brain doesn't separate pleasure from trajectory. Enjoyment that erodes the future doesn't feel like enjoyment at all. It feels like self-sabotage. So, while others bond over momentary relief, you feel alienated, not because you don't care, but because you care too far ahead. This creates isolation that's hard to explain. You're not bored with people, you're out of sync with them. Your clock doesn't sync with the herd. The herd runs on immediacy. Now, tonight, this weekend, this year, you operate on horizons. 5 years, 10 years, legacy, irreversibility. Trying to connect across that gap feels like trying to discuss architecture with someone choosing wallpaper. Neither of you is wrong, but you are not compatible. This is why you often feel like the watchman on the wall, awake while others sleep, seeing storms before clouds form, being dismissed until the danger arrives, and when it does arrive, suddenly they want your foresight, your discipline, your clarity. But by then, you've usually learned the hardest lesson. You can't drag people into the future. You either walk alone, or you slow yourself down to stay understood. And you chose to walk. But The rarest trait explains why manipulation fails on you. The autotelic engine, the final trait. This is the rarest trait of all, and the one that makes every form of manipulation fail on you. You are internally fueled. Psychology calls this the autotelic personality. It means the reward is built into the action itself. You don't work for applause. You don't create for validation. You don't move because someone is watching. You move because not moving feels wrong. Validation is unnecessary. Most people are externally regulated. They need mirrors to feel real. Compliments stabilize them. Attention confirms existence. Approval keeps them functional. Take those inputs away and they destabilize fast. That's why exclusion works on them. That's why silence hurts them. That's why social punishment is effective. But when those same tactics are used on you, something unexpected happens. Nothing. You don't panic when messages go unanswered. You don't spiral when you're ignored. You don't bend when approval is withheld. Because your sense of meaning doesn't come from being seen. It comes from doing the work. Work is the reward. When you build, your nervous system settles. When you train, your mind quiets. When you learn, you feel aligned. This is not discipline in the motivational sense. This is neurological alignment. Your brain releases dopamine from engagement, not outcome, from process, not praise. That's why you can sit alone for hours and feel focused instead of lonely. That's why long stretches of solitude don't break you. They sharpen you. Exclusion doesn't punish you. This terrifies people, because exclusion is society's primary control mechanism. If you don't comply, you won't belong. If you don't agree, you'll be isolated. If you don't perform, you'll be ignored. These threats work only on people who need the group to regulate their identity. You don't. When someone tries to punish you with distance, you experience relief. When someone withdraws attention, you regain energy. When a group goes quiet, you go deeper into your work. The weapon misfires. Social leverage fails. And when leverage fails, power dynamics invert. People sense, often unconsciously, that they cannot control you with approval or fear. They can't bribe you with inclusion. They can't threaten you with rejection. You are unreachable through the usual channels. This is why manipulators avoid you. This is why narcissists lose interest. This is why shallow groups feel destabilized by your presence. You cannot be moved by incentives they understand. End state, clarity. You are not lonely. You are self-sustaining. Your solitude isn't emptiness. It's independence. Your quiet isn't absence. It's focus. Your isolation isn't rejection. It's immunity. This doesn't mean you never connect. It means connection is optional, not necessary, chosen, not begged for, rare, not constant. And when you do connect, it's different. It's not transactional. It's not performative. It's not based on mutual distraction. It's based on resonance. Until then, you remain stable without it. That's the final truth. You were never meant to be surrounded. You were meant to be self-powered. Comment, "I am self-powered." Or comment, "Silence doesn't weaken me." If this clarified why solitude feels different for you, subscribe. Iron Psyche isn't about belonging. It's about sovereignty.